So,
More.
welcome back to this session. Nicole is going to kick us off with a topic that I think anybody out there could relate to because we've all experienced it. We all have this in our neurophysiology and we all encounter this. So, Nicole, take it away. Tell us a little bit about where you've seen this and this challenge in particular.
A lot of the things that I've been seeing come up lately with my clients and myself, even as we grow in our business, is fear. It's like this thing that creeps in slowly, it slithers in and it comes and tries to take over with what we're doing. And some people might call it imposter syndrome, or some people like there's all of these different names for this. But what I see happen is, and I don't know, have you read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks? I think it's Gay Hendricks. It's a book, super good book, but it just talks about like when you're getting to that next level of what you're supposed to be doing and you're being challenged, right? Fear can come in. And I think there's also then a resistance of our old habits and our old things that try to sneak in. And that's why I think it's going to be interesting to talk to you about this, because the habits and the patterns of our neural system that try to keep us in the same space we've been, right? So this is where I think growth can be hard because we tend to, I always joke with my clients or use the analogy. If we put our business goals as a GPS going in on vacation, you're going to put, you want to go to San Diego. You want to put that you're going to go somewhere and you're going to come across road construction. There's going to be road closures. There's going to be bad weather. There's going to be all of these things, but you know, you want to go and get to that place. It's like your business, you're going to come across all these roadblocks. And what happens is so often people get so frustrated when they hit their first roadblock or they feel their first angst that instead of putting something else in the GPS or rerouting or being patient and waiting it out, they turn around and they go back home and
Yeah.
they skip the destination completely. So I think like that to me is a real thing in business because it's like, how do you know when to keep going? How do you know when to give up? What does that look like? How does that feel? But I know all of us as leaders and entrepreneurs, like we've had those moments where it's, oh, can I just have the crystal ball? Is this the right path? Should I not? Like what's real? What's not?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that comes to mind is I always use this analogy when it comes to performance of that we're all climbing our own performance mountain. And
Yes.
everybody's mountain looks different and we climb different mountains throughout our lives, but we're all climbing our own mountain. And as we're climbing, we move through these kind of different stages or phases. And at the bottom, it's all about just understanding what is it that I'm doing? How am I supposed to get there? How do I do this? There's a lot of learning that happens at that base level.
Yeah.
And then over time, we get into developing where we're developing more skill sets and we're getting to do the things that we now know how to do. And then ultimately, once we get through developing, we start achieving. That's where we start really achieving results and seeing the skills that we've learned come to fruition and get to outcomes. And then ultimately, we get to mastery, which is where we've reached the peak of our performance, where we've gotten to that level or that depth of not just knowing, but being able to demonstrate our capabilities consistently in achieving results. And then there's this thing that happens. We get there and we might stay in mastery for a little while,
Yeah.
but by and large, and for the most part, either we end up choosing to go climb another mountain. That was
Yep.
fun, but let's tackle another one. Get knocked off the mountain and have to start again. Something disrupts where we've gotten to in our life, and we've got to learn again. We've got to learn a new way of operating, a new organization, a new role. This happens a lot when you become the top performer and then you become a leader
Yeah.
and you're starting right back at the bottom again. And so I think there's this to me there's this comfort that kind of comes from seeing growth as phases. And certainly when you
Yeah.
leave, no matter how successful you were, no matter how high and how mastered you were at your profession, when you step outside
Mhm.
to become an entrepreneur, you're back at base. You're back starting over.
Yeah.
And it can feel so different from where you came from to where you are that it feels almost like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But we forgot what it felt like the first time we had to learn our job or the first time we started
Mhm.
a new role we'd never been in before and how challenging and difficult that was. And so it's not really necessarily that it's harder, but it's starting over again. And
Yeah.
so we have to give ourselves a lot of grace in that process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can't see, but I made a really pretty drawing of a mountain. But I do think even just having that context of you're right, it is those development stages. And when we have been good at something for so long, like we've been able to teach and train and help people and get there, whatever that looks like. And then you're right. Is it another mountain? I mean, we've all been knocked off, I'm assuming, the mountain that we've been on too. Like it's all learning and there's so much humbleness in owning your own business and being a leader. It's okay. Yep. Here you got this. But looking, I love that growth as phases. That's beautiful.
Well,
Because then go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and I think as you're climbing that, if it were just about developing the capabilities, if it
Mhm.
were just about having the right skills, we would all climb with ease because we
Yeah.
know how to develop a capability. We know how to learn a skill. I think that what we underestimate is the challenge that the time it takes to
Yeah.
cultivate those capabilities and our own, again, our own ways of being that are going to trip us up or make it more difficult to develop those capabilities. And I think those are the things that often come up for us. Those are the fears and the limiting beliefs and the things that trip us up more than anything. And for anybody in any role, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an individual in your first career, your first job, the thing that often gets in people's way the most is those internal ways of being that aren't aligning with the environment that they've now put themselves in.
Yeah, and I think too, if you think about that, and especially when you've done something well and you're coming up against new things, it's like it's so easy to go, that wasn't meant to be. That's not simple. But knowing, and I've seen it a million times, I'm sure you have, and from the neuroscience standpoint too, like when you can push through that, like that's when you get to that next level on the top. But it's so easy to when you hit that resistance to turn around at that point and to not and to let fear take over.
To believe somehow, I mean, it almost is it's interesting because 'cause I'm reflecting on it myself right now, but it's almost absurd to believe that somehow we're going to hit mastery
Yeah.
of a new skill at the beginning. That somehow, although we haven't done it before, we've
Mm,
never written a book before, we've never owned a business before, we've never run our own business before,
right.
we've never done financials, all the things that come with entrepreneurship or just starting a job in general, that
Yeah.
somehow we're just gonna naturally be great at it. And that's counterintuitive
Yeah.
to how human intelligence develops because our pathways form based on patterns and based on repeated activity and reinforcement. That's how you develop mastery. That's how you get better at things. So to think that you're somehow going to be a superstar from the very beginning. Now, that's not to say that there isn't raw talent involved. Certainly
Right.
there is. Certainly if you're 6'7", you're gonna be a better shot of being a great basketball player than
And
if you're 5 foot
and you
2.
got 5'1". Yeah.
Yeah, like, there's some nuance there. The 5'2", 5'1" person's gonna have to work really hard. So there of course, there's some natural talent there, but that doesn't equate to
Yeah.
mastery. Natural talent
Oh,
alone doesn't lead to results and outcomes all on its own.
that's a really good and I think too, right now where I am in my business and forging new things and doing new things, it is hard because you wanna get to that mastery because 'cause you've been there, done that, like, it should be easy, but that's part of the whole process and the whole yeah, it's so good. I feel like I wanna sit and ruminate on this a little bit more too, because this, I think, is a huge opportunity for conversation and ability and
Well, and one place I see this go really wrong, and I think that this maybe is some of our pre-programmed beliefs that then come up into this, is that we went to school and there was A's and B's and
Mm,
C's. You either
yeah,
were achieving or you weren't.
yeah,
In a lot of workplaces, there's these performance reviews, and you're above average, you're excellent, you're average, you're below average. When in reality, that's not really what's the metric we're measuring someone
yeah.
against? Are we measuring them against someone else at the exact same place in time?
Yeah,
That
because there's
that
no way. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So what constitutes average? What constitutes above average? Or are we just looking at where a person is in terms of their pathway to mastery. And when we look at it in that context, one thing I think that helps a lot is it's okay for me to say that I'm still at the understanding stage of
Yeah,
being a business owner and entrepreneur.
yeah,
I haven't been in this role long enough to have mastered
yeah.
it. It's not possible, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm below average or that I'm have a D or an F, right? But if we
Yes.
grew up in these patterns and we have these ways of being that say, depending upon my score or depending on how I'm evaluated or that determines whether I'm being successful or not, then we struggle to measure our progress against a pattern that doesn't exist in the world that we're now operating in,
And then you take the people that are the entrepreneur or are the and there's no scale. Like,
right?
it is like you're freeballing it and you have no idea and there's no measure. So then there's that a whole other extreme of issues and problems of like, how do you even handle that? Which is just great. You can make your own in some aspects, but we are conditioned to want to like, what is the path up the mountain? Give me a little bit of right?
Yes.
Okay. So now thinking about this, like what's our tangible thing for people with this episode? What can we like I loved how you said, and it keeps coming through to me too, like grace, right? Giving ourselves some grace, I think is an important piece when we're thinking about this. And
I think seeing yourself on a path versus somehow getting a grade or a score fail, right? So if we can see ourselves as just how do we move ourselves one step further on our journey or how do we continue to develop the skill or the capability we need to keep progressing on our journey, and
yeah.
that requires experience. And so sometimes it's just doing something over and over again even if we aren't very good at it so that we can get good at it. So we can keep practicing, so that we can keep honing that skill set. But you don't get to be the
Mhm.
best from the very beginning. It
No.
takes some cultivation of skills.
And I love that. And I think what I've always said too when I'm coaching with people, it's just what's the next step? Like you can have your destination, but you can't get so hyper focused on that that you lose sight. Like sometimes we just have to use the next step. What's the next step? And I think I needed to hear this today just as much as anybody else. I'm like, yeah, because it's so easy to want to be to the top of that mountain. And it's, you know what? What is that next step? What can I do next without overwhelming myself or feeling like a failure and then just turning around and going back home and letting fear take over?
And being willing to see those next steps for development and growth
Yes.
as development and growth
Oh,
rather than as a reflection on you as an individual, right? So I made a decision that led to a loss, or I had a tough month of sales, or the things that you're doing, instead of looking at it as a reflection of who you are and your value and worth, how do I look at that through that lens of learning and growth and do that self-reflection? What emotions are coming up? What's happening here?
yeah.
What led me to do that? What could I have done differently? Why would I want to have done it differently? And to do that work so that you get the learning and growth out of it rather than just punish yourself.
It's so good because I would say as much as the wins you have in business, like, the lows and the, "Oh, shit" moments and the ignorance tax that we pay on some of those losses and those things
Yes.
are more valuable than the wins because you just that's where the magic is. So I love that. I think this literally jazzes me up to think about talking and getting allowing the grace and the ability to think about things in that way, like,
I I once had a coach of mine say to me, I'd lost about $20,000 in an opportunity that I'd pursued, and she said, "Thank God it was only $20,000." And I was like, "What do you mean? That's a lot." And she's 10 years from now that could have been $20,000,000. Who knows? And so it was this, oh, okay, so there is perspective here. And even though that felt very painful and challenging in the moment, when I if I look back on that 10 years from now, it might look very different. And so giving yourself that grace to no matter how big the challenge or the issue, to give it that perspective and to say, okay, what will you learn from this that will make sure you don't have a $20,000,000 loss ten years from now?
I love that. And to think about the fear that can come up in those moments. Is it fear that's negatively holding you back, or is it fear that's prohibiting you from getting to that next stage, right? Like that
Yeah,
discernment, I think is huge too. Oh my gosh, I feel like there's going to be way more to come with this, but
yeah,
I feel like right now
I
that is
love
an
it.
amazing stuff to chew on and to think about. And yeah, we definitely will be continuing this
Yeah.
conversation.
So think about where you are and just see it as another step on your journey.
And if you want to make a beautiful mountain drawing or see mine, message me and I will show you mine because it's beautiful.
I love it.